Hi, welcome to the video. So I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of reading standard music, tablature, and or if you should kind of read both. And some people, I would say, should use certain elements of standard music. Some people maybe not use it at all, and other people should learn it. I think everyone should learn tab just because it's. I'll get into more reasons, but basically it's very simple. I teach tab in my very first lessons when I'm teaching private lessons to a complete beginner right after learning to tune the guitar. And at that same lesson, you can write out exercises or pieces of song anywhere on the neck, and they can go home and practice them. If I was writing in standard music, they wouldn't be able to do that because it would be way too complex to find the notes on the neck and the notes on the staff and be able to play anywhere on the neck. So once you learn tab, you can play equally everywhere. Most people on learning standard music will spend a long time just playing that open position. So I don't teach, for most part, standard music to beginners unless they request it. And even then I try and push them away from that, honestly. But I do teach it to some people, and I'll go through who I do teach that to. I teach elements of it to everyone. So one thing before you jump into it, I'd say whatever you're reading, try and get off the paper as quickly as possible. If you're reading an exercise, a scale, chord progression, a song, melody, whatever, you're not going to be able to usually play it as well when you're sight reading it. If you memorize it, you can then really concentrate on the nuances of rhythmic variations, your technique, your timing, all this other things. But while you're still sight reading, you're kind of multitasking already, so you can't focus completely on what you're doing on guitar. So whatever system you're using, memorize it as quickly as you can. So let's jump into it. So one thing that I would recommend, basically everyone learn some aspects of reading standard music. One of the main ones is learning to read rhythms. Quarter notes, eighth notes, dotted notes, ties, 16th notes, all of that rhythmic stuff, which is a good portion of the learning of reading standard music. When I was at G.I.T, they actually taught rhythms first in the sight reading class before even adding notes. We went through an entire book of just sight reading rhythms, so you were really proficient with rhythms before you ever even touched notes. Now, most people who were going there, including myself, could already read music before we got there, but it still improved my rhythm playing doing that. And I'll link videos on some of this stuff up there, which will also be in the description too. I did a video talking about that book, and you can download it as a PDF and stuff. It's on various places online. So reading rhythms is important. Sight reading them will help your actual timing and rhythm playing, especially if you do it with a drum machine or a metronome. It gives you a way to also write out rhythms that you create without having to record it on something and then go back and try and figure out later. It also allows you to practice your scales and exercises more efficiently. If you're doing maybe basic exercise like that, you can play it without a rhythm, but it's easier to build it up in speed and help your timing also if you put it with a metronome and then with different note groupings such as eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then when you get to a beat that's too fast to do eighth notes, slow the beat back down, and then do 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a, like that. Or maybe go with 32nd notes eventually, so we're going 1, 2, and playing all 8 notes within the beat. So anyways, a lot of benefit to reading rhythms on it. And when you look at tab doesn't have its own system of writing rhythms. So they either use standard notation rhythms attached to the numbers, which isn't used that much, or a lot of times they'll write the standard music above the tab. So you can just look up, even if you can't read the notes, and look at the rhythmic notation in the standard music, and that will be the same as for the tab. So you can figure out the notes or where you're playing in the tab and the rhythm by looking at the standard music. Also, chord progressions will oftentimes use the rhythmic notation for the strumming patterns. Okay, another thing that can help you, even if you're not going to read the notes on the staff in standard music, is learning key signatures. And I'll link a video to one on circle fits, which will show that. and talk about that. And the key signatures basically tells you what key you're playing in. If you know what key you're in, maybe you're in key of 3 sharps, which is key of A major, or you're in key of C major, which is no sharps or flats. It allows you to know what chords, what scales, what arpeggios, all those things that fit inside that key. So if you look through and just scan through the regular music, the standard notation, and you don't see any sharps, flats, or natural signs, then you know that whole piece is 100% in the key that it's written in. So if you know it's taking place in like an A minor position scale, you know it's not going to deviate at all from that. Everything they do, no matter, even if they shift positions and stuff, it'll all be within that key still. Okay. So who should actually learn standard music? So now I'm going to get into that a little bit. I would say if your main style is jazz or classical, it's probably going to be beneficial for you to learn that, because a lot of the books in music is written in standard music for those two styles, either because it was written a long time ago, before, even though tab has existed for a long time, it wasn't used that popularly till probably the 80s. That's when I started seeing more publications coming out with it, and then it really took off. More once the internet became more popular and people were having websites and YouTube videos and stuff using tab. Or it's written by people who aren't guitarists. Maybe you're trying to learn a classical violin or piano or a jazz saxophone piece, so there's going to be no tab. It's not going to be in standard music because it wasn't written for guitar. And I've done a few videos where I transcribe and kind of arrange violin or piano pieces for videos, and then tab it out for you guys. So even if you're not into jazz and classical that much, maybe you're primarily a heavy metal player, but you want to be able to learn some of these pieces from other instruments to incorporate them into your playing, then at least the basic level of reading standard music would be beneficial. You don't have to be super quick, but enough so you can figure it out and then tab it out for yourself. If you're planning to take music classes in college or in high school, a lot of those will be only in standard music. Some teachers in like high school might be nice and download the song you're learning in tab, or you might be able to find it online. But a lot of it's, those teachers aren't even guitarists. So a lot of times they'll hand out things that are in standard music, and they'll hand the same sheet to all the different instruments, whether you're a trumpet player, piano player, guitarist, you'll get kind of the same melody sheet or chord sheet, not even a lot of times with chord boxes. So if you're taking classes in college or high school, you probably are going to need to know standard music. If you're planning to read music theory books, same thing, they're probably going to be written in standard music. You're not going to find too many that are tabbed out. Not saying there aren't some written by guitarists that maybe are, but the vast majority will be in standard music. But if you're not doing any of those, then there's a good chance you probably don't need it so much. It can have some other benefits. For example, reading standard music will help you to learn the notes on the neck. But here's the thing. It's kind of splitting your time between two different things. I think it's more important to know the notes on the neck, to build picking a note and say, okay, this is an E note, this is a C note, etc. That will help you to understand the guitar better, even if you're only using tab. And there's a lot of different ways to learn the notes on the neck without using standard music. And I think they're quicker than using standard music. Most people spend a lot of time just learning one position in standard music. And yeah, they can then put that into different positions, the same notes. But you can use octaves, you can count up, you can rearrange your chords, your scales, your arpeggios, transpose your licks, and do all this stuff without doing standard music, just by knowing the notes on the neck. If you can figure out what the notes are, then if you have a chord, some sort of melody or something, you can then find that in different spots, and that will help you to learn the notes on the neck. Okay, that's why we're talking about for standard music. It's both good and bad, but in most cases I'd say it's bad. It's basically the fact that the reason why most guitarists don't play standard music, but you look at like a pianist and they all do, is because on piano, if you have like an A minor arpeggio, which is A, C, E, if you have that in a specific octave, not starting here instead of starting at a higher or lower octave, it's going to be played the exact same way, and there's only going to be one way to play it, because you only have one of each of those notes in that octave. But on guitar, you've got multiple places to play the same notes. It's basically like if you stacked 6 keyboards on top of each other and you can reach between them for any of the notes. So if I'm playing that same arpeggio on guitar, instead of one option, if I'm looking at the standard music, it's only written in that one way. But I can go A, C, E, A, C, E, A, C, E, or A, C, E. 4 different ones from this one position. But then I can also move up to this note, which is the same octave A, and play the same 4 positions except for this one, which cross the B string, which will be fingered differently, but the other ones will be fingered the same. Then I could move this A up to here, same note, same octave. It's on a different string, so it sounds a little bit different, but as far as standard notation, it would be written the same way. I could play the same 4 shapes. Then you could move down here, same octave. Now, because of the B string, the shapes will all look different other than the one that is on one string. So right there, 16 different ways. They could be notated in 16 different ways on tab, but would only be notated one way on standard music. Now, you could use position markings and stuff to help designate where it's being played on the standard music, but a lot of music doesn't include that, and the only time it's included is if a guitarist wrote it up. If it's written by another instrument, it wouldn't be being used because that's guitar specific. But even a lot of guitarists don't use that, especially if you're moving over the neck. It just becomes very clunky and not very easy to read if you're constantly having to change positions as you move. I mean, as far as the writing, if you have to write, okay, 5th position, then 7th position as you're shifting through the neck, you might as well just write it out on tab at that point then. And there's even more options. If I'm doing this, I could go A, C, and then reach back into one of the other groups. I could go A, C, E. So there's really dozens of ways to play that one arpeggio in that single octave on guitar. And every time you add a new note to a grouping, you get more options. So there can be thousands of possibilities to play a song as you reach A, C, E, and then maybe go G, A, C, E, G, and you add more and more notes, you get more and more options. It just keeps multiplying your possibilities. So it's really hard to accurately interpret something that was a guitar part from standard music. You can maybe listen and hear which is, but if you're having to figure out by ear on that, that kind of defeats the purpose of having the sheet music to some degree. Now, this can be a good thing, though, sometimes, in that if you're reading a part that wasn't written for guitar, like a violin part, I actually avoid tab. This is the one time that I don't use tab. I pretty much always read tab if I have a choice. But if I'm reading a piano piece or a violin piece, even if someone else has tabbed it out, I usually won't use that. Because there is so many different ways to interpret those same notes. I want to find the ways that work best for me and make the most sense for me, and not necessarily have someone else's interpretation, which wasn't the original author's interpretation, but just their way of thinking how it should be done. Okay, so that's kind of the main reason why, though, on tab is so much easier because it tells you specifically what the author wants, and that's why I use tab even when I'm writing for myself and no one's going to see it. Because if I look at something 6 months later and it was sincere music, I'm really going to have trouble remembering what I was thinking. If it's tabbed out, I'm going to know exactly what I was thinking, and maybe I specifically wrote it because it was an unusual way to play something they normally would play a different way. I wouldn't ever realize that if I didn't tab it out. So I always tab out this stuff for myself, and that also for my students. Okay, so I think I'll wrap it up with that. Please like and subscribe and check out some of my other videos. I've got over 100 pages of tab on my Patreon page, which you can download for free. You don't have to be a member. Each one's attached to a video they correspond with, and you can find a link to that in my description. And thanks for watching.